disappeared, and Rodney?
No,
I'm still here.
he's still
Okay.
with us.
There you are. I had to change my screen thing. Hello, Pam.
Hello.
Okay.
You're dark. You got to turn your light on, Pam.
Oh, I'm saving electricity.
I got a notice from Duke Power the other day that we were supposed to save electricity because we was having a potential shortage. It was telling you what not to turn on and stuff like that.
Okay, I'm recording y'all just to let you know.
Okay.
Anything you say
Will be held against us.
will be held against you in the court of law. So, all
Damn.
right, there we go. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we are going to continue our study of the Urantia Book. We're on paper 152, Events Leading Up to the Capernaum Crisis, and that's on page 1698.1 of the original book, or paper 15201 in the rest of them. Okay, let me see if I can change this. Isn't that a pretty slide, y'all?
Good.
Yeah. Gosh, Pam, you're really dark.
Sorry.
Yes, she is.
We have another person with us, everybody, named Pam. She's in the dark. When you see her read,
Good.
she is a white woman, believe it or not. So. Okay, here we go. Events leading up to the Capernaum crisis. The story of the cure of Amos, the Caressa lunatic, had already reached Bethsaida in Capernaum, so that a great crowd was waiting for Jesus when his boat landed that Tuesday afternoon. Among this throng were the new observers from the Jerusalem Sanhedrin, who had come down to Capernaum to find cause for the master's apprehension and conviction. As Jesus spoke with those who had assembled to greet him, Jairus, one of the rulers of the synagogue, made his way up through the crowd, and falling down on his feet, took him by the hand and besought that he would hasten away with him, saying, "Master, my little daughter, an only child, lies in my home at the point of death. I pray that you will come and heal her." When Jesus heard the request of his father, he said, "I will go with you." Okay, so we're going to find out what this crisis is in a little bit. So y'all don't get too antsy on me here. Okay, and that's everything they did in this period of time on the map. Okay, and that's another one. All right, so Diane, would you take?
As Jesus went along with Jairus, the large crowd which had heard the father's request followed on to see what would happen. Shortly before they reached the ruler's house, as they hastened through a narrow street and as the throng jostled them, Jesus suddenly stopped, exclaiming, "Someone touched me." And when those who were near him denied that they had touched him, Peter spoke up, "Master, you can see that this crowd presses you, threatening to crush us, and yet you say someone has touched me. What do you mean?" Then Jesus said, "I asked who touched me, for I perceived it seemed that living energy had gone forth from me." As Jesus looked about him, his eyes fell upon a nearby woman who, coming forward, knelt at his feet and said, "For years I have been afflicted with a scourging, hemorrhage. Hemorrhage. I'm sorry. I have suffered many things from many physicians. I have spent all my substance, but none could cure me. Then I heard of you, and I thought, if I may but touch the hem of his garment, I shall certainly be made whole. And so I pressed forward with the crowd as it moved forward until standing near you, Master, I touched the border of your garment, and I was made whole. I know that I have been healed of my affliction."
You're muted.
Yeah, I got it. I started to go on. I was so excited. All right. Did y'all notice that Jesus said, I perceive the living energy going forth from me?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't, it didn't actually go forth from Jesus's body.
Yes,
It
it
went
did.
through
It
his body.
did. Yeah, it went forth through his body to, the power of healing because he's the creator son.
You
You
know,
can
this
think of it,
But
you
it
can
went
think
from Michael through his body.
that's right. Yeah. But you can think of it as him being encircuited, right? Part of the encircatedness of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And the healing power that he had was always with him. And those who believed in such a manner believed if they could just get near him, they could plug into the circuit, literally, plug into his power. And that's what happened.
this must have been the will of God the Father because Jesus didn't do healing unless God wanted him to do it.
That's right. It wasn't his will that this happened, was it?
No, so God the Father was watching him and says, heal her.
Yeah, he literally, God the Father stepped in and said, okay, this woman has the faith. I'm going to use my son to heal her, right?
Mm-hmm.
All
That's
right.
my understanding.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Yes. When Jesus heard this, he took the woman by the hand and lifting her up, said, Daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. It was her faith and not her touch that made her whole. In this case is a good illustration of many apparently miraculous cures which attend upon Jesus' earth career, but which he in no sense consciously willed. The passing of time demonstrated that this woman was really cured of her malady. Her faith was of the sort that it laid direct hold upon the creative power resident in the Master's person. With the faith she had, it was only necessary to approach the Master's person. It was not at all necessary to touch his garment. That was merely the superstitious part of her belief. Jesus called this woman Veronica of Caesarea Philippi into his presence to correct two errors which might have lingered in her mind, or which might have persisted in the minds of those who witnessed this healing. He did not want Veronica to go away thinking that her fear in attempting to steal her cure had been honored, or that her superstition in associating the touch of his garment with her healing had been effective. He desired all to know that it was her pure and living faith that had wrought the cure.
Okay, there it is right there. It was her faith that made her whole. She didn't have to really touch him. Her faith itself would have done it. And her being in the presence of a creator son, his creative power in the master's person would have made her whole anyway, because he was not conscious of doing this miracle, right? It was her faith. Very interesting study of that one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Gary, would you take the next one?
When Jesus heard this, he took that's we have got to switch it there,
Oh,
bud.
I hadn't changed it up here. I changed it on mine.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. One at Jairus' house. Am I saying it right?
That's close enough.
Okay. Jairus was, of course, terribly impatient of this delay in reaching his home. So they now hastened on at a quickened pace. Even before they entered the ruler's yard, one of his servants came out saying, "Trouble not the master, your daughter is dead." But Jesus seemed not to heed the servant's words. For talking with him, Peter, James, and John, he turned.
Taking with him Peter, James, and John. Not talking.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. You lost me.
Yeah.
He had turned and said to the grief-stricken father, "Fear not, only believe." When he entered the house, he touched the fruit players.
He found.
Okay, I'm having a hard time seeing. Sorry. He
It's all right.
found the fruit players already there with the mourners, who were making an unseemly turmoil. Already were the relatives engaged in weeping and wailing. And when he had put all the mourners out of the room, he went in with the father and mother and his three apostles. He had told the mourners that the damsel was not dead, but they laughed him to scorn. Jesus now turned to the mother, saying, "Your daughter is not dead, she is only asleep." And when the house had quieted down, Jesus came up to where the child lay, took her by the hand, and said, "Daughter, I say to you, awake and arise." And when the girl heard these words, she immediately rose up and walked across the room. And presently, after she had recovered from her daze, Jesus directed that they should give her something to eat, for she had been a long time without food.
So, Roger,
Yes,
back then, they didn't know what a coma was.
they didn't.
They didn't have any words for it.
Yeah, they had no idea that she was actually in a coma, and Jesus, really, it was a miracle in itself because Jesus brought her out of the coma, right?
It was like putting the forget. I think it's
Smelling salts?
Smelling
yes,
salt.
smelling salts or
Yeah, it's much like that. The thing of it is, he actually healed her too because she had some kind of infirmity to make her that way, right? And so
pneumonia.
she, huh? Yeah,
Pneumonia.
yeah,
I was trying to think of.
yeah. But he did actually heal her. But of course, they all thought he rose her from the dead, didn't they? Which
Mhm.
is not what happened. Okay.
I wonder how many people in the old was actually died who actually was buried when they were in a coma.
Yeah,
Probably quite
quite a
often.
few.
How
Yeah,
awful.
yeah. Just the way it was. Pam, would you take the next one?
Uh-huh. Since there was much agitation in Capernaum against Jesus, he called the family together and explained that the maiden had been in a state of coma following a long fever, and that he had merely aroused her, that he had not raised her from the dead. He likewise explained all this to his apostles, but it was futile. They all believed he had raised the little girl from the dead. What Jesus said in explanation of many of these apparent miracles had little effect on his followers. They were miracle-minded and lost no opportunity to ascribe another wonder to Jesus. Jesus and the apostles returned to Bethsaida after he had specifically charged all of them that they should tell no man.
Okay. Would y'all not call this a crisis?
Yes, but I think he messed up.
Well, this is what they call it, the crisis in Capernaum, because when they thought he raised someone for the dead, it scared everyone. Okay. Even
Mhm.
though it was a miracle. So,
You know where he messed up?
where?
He said, "Tell no man, but when you tell a woman's a secret, you know it spreads."
Yeah,
Only you would say that, Gary. Maybe he should have modified his saying, tell no woman. Okay, let's go on. When he came out of Jairus's house, two blind men led by a dumb boy. Well, that's a sight, isn't it? Followed him and cried out for healing. About this time, Jesus' reputation as a healer was at its very height. Everywhere he went, the sick and afflicted were waiting for him. The master now looked much worn, and all of his friends were becoming concerned lest he continue his work of teaching and healing to the point of actual collapse.
It's interesting they put the dumb boy and the
Yeah.
two blind men, and they don't say anything more about it.
No, they don't.
They just had to stick it in there.
Yeah. It just seemed like a good story that way, right? All right.
As they say, in the dumb leading the blind.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That happens a lot, right? Nowadays. Look at our meetings. What can I say?
I think I've been insulted.
No, y'all aren't lying. I was thinking about y'all when I was making a video this week about the third psychic circle. And I was trying to explain the three ways that you can receive your guardian angels, right? One of them is reaching the third psychic circle. The second one is to become part of the I'm losing my mind now. I said it so many times this week. The core of more, not the finaliters. What am I thinking?
I just heard that thing this morning.
The emergency core, right?
Yeah, I
humans,
said, got it.
1,000 humans. But the third one is to make that supreme decision, right? To decide to, in your mind, to follow the will of God. That will put you on the paradise path. And soon as you make that decision, a pair of guardian angels is assigned to you. And the point was I was making in the video is I felt like all the people in our study group have already made that decision. I think everyone here has two guardian angels, because why else, if you hadn't made that decision, why would you dedicate so much time to studying this book? Okay.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point. All right, let's see who's next. I guess I am. Did you just read, Pam?
Yes.
Okay. Jesus' apostles, let alone the common people, could not understand the nature and wait a minute, didn't I just read?
No.
Okay.
Go back one.
Okay. Yeah, I read that.
Yeah,
No,
you're right.
I think didn't I read that? No, you read that. That's
No,
right. You read that.
Okay, so
It's my turn.
it's
Diane's turn.
Diane's turn then. Okay.
Oh, Lord.
Jesus' apostles, let alone the common people, could not understand the nature and attributes of this God man. Neither has any subsequent generation been able to evaluate what took place on earth in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. And there can never occur an opportunity for either science or religion to check up on these remarkable events for the simple reason that such an extraordinary situation can never again occur, either on this world or on any other world in Nebadon. Never again on any world in this entire universe will a being appear in the likeness of mortal flesh, at the same time embodying all the attributes of creative energy combined with spiritual endowments, which transcend time and most other material limitations.
Right.
Did you notice that will never happen again, even if the sons of God, like the magisterial sons or the Trinity teacher sons or any sons of God that comes to planets, they will never perform miracles like Jesus did. Why? Because they don't have the creative power, right?
They're not creative sons.
They're not creative sons. And he's the only one that has come to a planet, and this 10 million planet universe eventually will be. He's the only one that has this power or had this power. So this will never happen again. Okay.
So it'll only happen a total of what? 700,000 times?
Yeah, one of 700,000 times, because there's 700,000 other local universes, right? And each one of those creator sons has to do what? Go through the 7 bestowal period process. Okay. God, y'all are smart. Okay, next. Diane, crazy. Roddy.
That's fine. Roddy's fine.
Whatever your name is, you're next.
Never before Jesus was on earth, nor since has it been possible so directly and graphically to secure the results attendant upon the strong and living faith of mortal men and women. To repeat these phenomena, we would have to go into the immediate presence of Michael, the Creator, and find him as he was in those days, the Son of Man. Likewise, today, while his absence prevents such material manifestations, you should refrain from placing any sort of limitation on the possible exhibition of his spiritual power. Though the Master is absent as a material being, he is present as a spiritual influence in the hearts of men. By going away from the world, Jesus made it possible for his spirit to live alongside that of his Father, which indwells the minds of all mankind.
So the spirit of truth he poured out on all the planet literally lives within the mind next to the fragment of the Father. Okay. So you can't really limit what spiritual miracles might happen in the days to come.
Roger,
Yeah.
on other planets, does the spirit of truth come after a magisterial?
Yes, after a magisterial son. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Rodney.
Well, I
What,
was just
Rodney?
curious because I thought perhaps it had never happened in this universe until Michael completed his 7th bestowal, and then he was able to pour out his spirit on all flesh and all worlds.
That is true, Rodney,
Okay.
because they talk about this. I don't remember which chapter it was off the top of my head. Remember, I forgot how to memorize every single word in the book, but just slipped my mind. But I'm being funny, y'all. But it does say in the chapters on the magisterial sons and the Trinity teacher sons that when a magisterial son comes to a planet, he does pour out the spirit of the son. They did, but pour out the spirit of the son before Jesus finished his 7th bestowal. But when Jesus finished his bestowal and poured out the spirit of truth, those planets that had already had magisterial sons, the spirit that they poured out was upgraded to the spirit of the Son of God.
Okay. That makes sense.
That makes sense?
Yes.
So planets just now being developed, okay? They will have to, because of the evolutionary process, they will have to wait for the spirit of truth of Jesus until a magisterial son comes, because that's part of the administrative process. Makes sense?
And
No.
then he will allow the spirit to be poured out.
Yeah, by the magisterial son.
Okay.
So you're
Now, keep in mind, before that happens, all these planets still have the Holy Spirit influence before all of this. right? They
Of
have the
course.
Holy Spirit influence from the beginning of creation.
Mhm.
So what you're saying is when Jesus creates another, or Michael creates another world, okay, there's no spirit of truth,
No.
but it only is when they come with the magisterial son,
Yeah, the Spirit of truth will come with the magisterial son.
like Macavitch.
Well, he was not a magisterial son. He was really a teacher,
An
uh,
emergency.
emergency teacher son. So it wouldn't come then either, but it would come. That most planets won't have an emergency teacher son come. They will just have a magisterial son come. And when the magisterial son comes, then when that magisterial son comes, dies, after 30 days, the Spirit of truth will be poured out on that planet, just like it did on this. It's the evolutionary process. Now, let me kind of explain why this is the case, because y'all are saying, why wouldn't it just be the Spirit of truth everywhere, right? That's the first question people, especially Urantians that are listening to our broadcast, might think, well, I thought the Spirit of truth would come immediately. But you got to remember, these
a
are,
Evolutionary process.
huh?
It's an evolutionary process.
It's an evolutionary process, and these early planets are full of barbaric animals. And what we consider human, they have to develop over time, just like our planet. Humans were on this planet 500,000 years before the Caligastia 100 came. Remember that? Okay, so, and it was another 200,000 years before the rebellion happened. Okay, but when the Caligastia 500 or 500, 100 came, the beings that we called humans on these planets they were just above animals. They were very barbaric. Okay, so when we read about Andon and Fanta, the first human beings, between that time and when the Caligastia 100, 500, I'm going to upgrade them, save my life. When the Caligastia 100 came, it had been 500,000 years since the first humans evolved.
Correct.
Okay, so there was 500,000 years of these beings running around grunting and stumping and beating each other with sticks and all this other stuff. So they were all pretty barbaric when the Caligastia 100 came. And when they came, that's when civilization really started.
Correct.
Okay, and that was about 500,000 years ago. Okay,
So the Caligastia 100 was sent originally by Satan, who was at that time was a servant of
no,
God.
No.
no. They were sent by at that time they were sent by our system sovereign, which was Lucifer.
Okay.
Okay, he had not decided to rebel at that time. For
Yeah.
the first 200, I think it's 250,000 years, they stayed here and taught people civilization, taught all these different things to them. See, the problem is this. Can I straighten something out tonight? Take a break from our paper for just a minute and straighten something out.
Please.
Is that okay with y'all?
Yes.
Yeah.
We got our history totally messed up. Okay, because we have all these people on the internet, everywhere else, trying to tell the history of the planet that they have no idea and no concept what really happened.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So they don't know about the Caligastia 100. They don't know that there was 250 years before the rebellion. In that 250,000 years, um, the planet evolved quite a bit. Okay. And then after the rebellion, there was another long period of time where Van and Nebadon was setting up societies all over the planet. Okay. So you have Göbekli Tepe and places like that. So everybody thought they were just hunter gatherers. Well, they were being civilized by the teachers of Van and Abaddon for hundreds of thousands of years. Okay, so civilization had developed several different places throughout the world, including South America, including all these other places. So all these amazing things we see on this planet, like the pyramids and things like that, all those things were developed in between the Caligastia 500 and
No.
Adam and Eve. Okay,
100.
huh?
100.
Caligastia 100. What did I say? 500 again?
Yeah.
I got that in my brain today, don't I? Okay, so all these things, all these civilizations have developed over time. Okay, they came and they went. Some of them got to be very, very, uh, very, what can I,
Sophisticated.
scientifically on a scale probably even above us. Okay, and those civilizations came and went. And the confusion is this: we are trying to look at a history that nobody knows anything about. So we have all these videos of people speculating that the Martians come down and aliens came down and set up these civilizations. They didn't come down and set up these civilizations. If any aliens came, they came in conjunction with the Caligastia 100. Okay. And we know some aliens came because the surgeons of Avalon came for both the Caligastia 100 and they came for Adam and Eve, did they not?
And for Melchizedek, correct.
And for Melchizedek. These were aliens, okay, to us. We don't know what they looked like. They could look like little green men. They could look like the Greys. They could look like anything and everything, okay? And then the other big confusion is the fact that because the 60 of the Caligastia 100 rebelled, when they were kicked out of the garden and they started mixing with all the men and women of the planets, they were all 8 feet. They were like, they thought they were gods. Okay. So they mixed with the men and the women, the men mixed with the women barbarians, and the men or the women mixed with the male barbarians. Okay, so we have this whole civilization that built up called the Nodites, and they were part of the Nephilim. Okay, that's where the Nephilim come from, and the giants came from. They all came from a very logical progression of the Caligastia 60 that rebelled. Now, the 40 that stayed loyal did not mix with any human beings. Okay, only the Caligastia 60. So what happens is this, and I hate to get way off track, but what happens is this, is their children and their children's children, some of them are giants, some of them are not. This goes over time and their descendants become part of the legends and the mythologies that develop of our history. Okay. And part of the mythology of our history is the flood that destroyed them all. The flood did not destroy them all. Okay. There were 3 floods on this planet that completely covered this planet. And that was before it was it had any population whatsoever. Okay. So there was never a great flood between the Caligastia 100 and Jesus. It didn't happen. Okay. It's a myth because Noah, a little bit mixed in the head, kept putting all of his animals on a boat and going out into the lake and telling everybody the world was coming to an end. So it became a legend. And that legend turned into a flood that destroyed all the Nephilim. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Y'all think I need to make a video on all these? That's probably what I
Oh,
need.
doesn't the book talk about Noah? And he was basically forecasting a
There
flood,
was a,
a major flood in that area.
which
And he
did happen.
was telling them to prepare for the flood.
Yeah, the flood was local though, Gary.
Yeah.
It didn't
Yeah, it wasn't
destroy it.
wasn't worldwide. It was like
It
the
wasn't
Mississippi.
worldwide. It was just like floods we would have around here or anywhere else where it was the low-lying area. Okay.
Mhm.
But he went out, and stayed out in the water, the stories and the myths about the bird and him getting the olive leaf and all this stuff. This all was developed from the story of Noah trying to convince everybody to get in the boat and go out and, so they don't get flooded out. Okay. That is not a world flood. I don't care what anybody tells you.
Correct.
All right. We want to make a distinction between what is myth and what is reality. The reality is the flood did not destroy the giants. The flood does not destroy the Nephilim. Okay. Because I'm going to tell you why. Because their descendants, their DNA was still around even up to a couple hundred years ago. There was some red giants out in the west, out near the Grand Canyon, they discovered out a couple hundred years ago. So the DNA of the giants is still in the DNA population of the world.
Yeah, and South America as well.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
I
Okay.
think the Dakota tribe out west was notorious for having exceptionally tall men.
Yeah, they were. But do y'all see where this is going? We've taken all this world history that we've been ignorant about before the Urantia book and tried to make up some logical sequence of world history that is wrong. Now, yeah, there was aliens coming to the planet before Adam and Eve and before Jesus and everything else, because they were the surgeons of Avalon. Okay, so yeah, we've had our DNA tweaked a couple times. Yes, that's all happened, but they weren't the concepts that we see. They weren't bird people like you see on the pyramids and all this stuff. Okay, that's all myth. And because there's drawings of it, because when they presented themselves to the American Indians and to the other tribes, what did they do? They dressed up. They probably put helmets on. They probably did a lot of things, and that's where we get all this misinterpretation of what actually happened. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Now they confuse everybody?
No.
No.
No. Okay. So I wanted to bring that up because I keep seeing this stuff over and over on TV, and people think it's true, and it's not. That's why I spent so much time doing the book on the angels and stuff, because there's so many misunderstandings about the celestial administration of this planet. There's so many misunderstandings about what all the angels and seraphim and all the other angels do. It needed to be straightened out.
Correct.
Right? It really did. So that's why I spent so much time this year on writing the book. And it'll be out next month. I got the copyright thing in this week. So I'm going to put it out in a different format than I did the other 3-4 books I did. And so I'll let y'all know when it's out there. But I've been doing some videos. The last month I've done a lot of videos on the first and second chapters of that book. I think out of 3 chapters of that book. So that's the videos I've been sending y'all.
Okay.
So, okay, let's keep going. Feeding the 5,000. Now I ate up all that time.
Okay. Number 2, feeding the 5,000. Jesus continued to teach the people by day while he instructed the apostles and evangelists at night. On Friday, he declared a furlough of 1 week that all his followers might go home or to their friends for a few days before preparing to go up to Jerusalem for the Passover. But more than 1/2 of his disciples refused to leave him, and the multitude was daily increasing in size, so much so that David Zebedee desired to establish a new encampment, but Jesus refused consent. The master had so little rest over the Sabbath that on Sunday morning, March 27th, he sought to get away from the people. Some of the evangelists were left to talk to the multitude while Jesus and the 12 planned to escape unnoticed to the opposite shore of the lake, where they proposed to obtain much needed rest in a beautiful park south of Bethsaida Julius. This region was a favorite resort resorting place for the Capernaum folk. They were all familiar with these parks on the eastern shore.
So he really needed a rest, didn't he? And that's what they were trying to do at this point. All right. But the people would not have it so. They saw the direction taken by Jesus's boat and hired every craft available. They started out in pursuit. Those who could not obtain boats fared forth on foot to walk around the upper end of the lake. So they were going to get there one way or another. All right, Diane.
By late afternoon, more than 1,000 persons had located the master in one of the parks, and he spoke to them briefly, being followed by Peter. Many of these people had brought food with them, and after eating the evening meal, they gathered about in small groups while Jesus's apostles and disciples taught them.
You need
I said they got spiritual food any way they look at it, didn't they?
Yeah.
All right, Rodney.
so
I think he just flipped one past.
I did.
Did
go.
I go over one?
I did.
No, you
I
Yeah.
couldn't
went
get
back.
back out.
You double clicked, I think.
You
Oh,
went
I
back.
okay.
did. Yeah.
Let me go back up here. I hit it
Hey.
again.
No,
No,
No?
Monday.
yeah, it starts on Monday. Next one. There.
Okay.
Okay, Monday afternoon, the multitude had increased to more than 3,000. And still, way into the evening, the people continued to flock in, bringing all manner of sick folks with them. Hundreds of interested persons had made their plans to stop over at Capernaum to see and hear Jesus on their way to the Passover, and they simply refused to be disappointed. By Wednesday noon, about 5,000 men, women, and children were assembled here in this park to the south of Bethsaida Julius. The weather was pleasant, it being near the end of the rainy season in this locality.
Okay, so they were having a rock concert, right?
Mm-hmm.
5,000.
5,000, that's a lot of people. All right, Gary, this is yours. Can you read that all right?
I think so. Philip had provided a 3 day supply of food for Jesus and the 12, which was in the custody of the Mark lad, their boy of all chores. By afternoon of this, the third day, for almost half of this multitude, the food the people had brought with them was nearly exhausted. David Zebedee had not intended what had no tended city here to feed and accommodate the crowds. Neither had Philip made food provisions for such a multitude. But the people, even though they were hungry, would not go away. It was being quietly whispered about that Jesus, desiring to avoid trouble with both Herod and the Jerusalem elite leaders, had chosen this quiet spot outside the jurisdiction of his enemies as the proper place to be crowned king. The enthusiasm of the people was rising every hour. Not a word was said to Jesus, though, of course, he knew all that was going on. Even the 12 apostles were still tainted with such notions, and especially the younger evangelists. The apostles who favored this attempt to proclaim Jesus King were Peter, John, uh, Simon Zealots, and Judas Iscariot. Those opposing the plan were Andrew, James, Nathaniel and Thomas, Matthew, Philip, and the Athesis twins were non-committal. The ringleader of this plot to make him king was Joab, one of the young evangelists.
So they decided they were going to make him king right there on the spot, right?
Mhm.
All right.
And this is the first time we hear about Mark.
Yeah, John Mark. Yeah, the boy. All right. Pam, would you take the next one?
This was the stage setting about 5 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon when Jesus asked James Alphaeus to summon Andrew and Philip. Said Jesus, "What shall we do with the multitude? They have been with us now for 3 days, and many of them are hungry. They have no food." Philip and Andrew exchanged glances, and then Philip answered, "Master, you should send these people away so that they may go to the villages around about and buy themselves food." And Andrew, fearing the materialization of the king plot, quickly joined with Philip, saying, "Yes, master, I think it best that you dismiss the multitude so that they may go their way and buy food while you secure rest for a season." By this time, others of the 12 had joined the conference. Then said Jesus, "But I do not desire to send them away hungry. Can you not feed them?" This was too much for Philip, and he spoke right up. "Master, in this country place where can we buy bread for this multitude? 200 denarii worth would not be enough for lunch."
All right. So they were in a quandary, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here we go. Before the apostles had an opportunity to express themselves, Jesus turned to Andrew and Philip, saying, "I do not want to send these people away. Here they are like sheep without a shepherd. I would like to feed them. What food have we with us?" While Philip was conversing with Matthew and Judas, Andrew sought out the Mark lad to ascertain how much was left in their store of provisions. He returned to Jesus, saying, "The lad has left only 5 barley loaves and 2 dried fishes." And Peter promptly added, "And we have yet to eat this evening." In other words, they hadn't eaten themselves. So, all right. Diane.
For a moment, Jesus stood in silence. There was a faraway look in his eyes. The apostles said nothing. Jesus turned suddenly to Andrew and said, "Bring me the loaves and fishes." And when Andrew had brought the basket to Jesus, the master said, "Direct the people to sit down on the grass in companies of 100 and appoint a leader over each group while you bring all of the evangelists here with us."
I want to point something out. When Jesus said he had a faraway look in his eyes, you reckon he was communicating with the master physical controllers or the midwayers?
Yeah.
You know,
And
because
probably his father
yeah,
asking if it was his will.
yeah. So here's a picture of Jesus feeding the masses. All right, the 5,000. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Jesus took up the loaves in his hands, and after he had given thanks, he broke the bread and gave it to his apostles, who passed it on to their associates, who in turn carried it to the multitude. Jesus, in like manner, broke and distributed the fishes. And this multitude did eat and were filled. And when they had finished eating, Jesus said to the disciples, "Gather up the broken pieces that remain over, so nothing will be lost." And when they had finished gathering up the fragments, they had 12 basketfuls. They who ate of this extraordinary feast numbered about 5,000 men, women, and children.
Now, wouldn't you call this a material miracle?
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
Definitely, right? And it's kind of funny when we get to the mansion worlds, they'll probably have a class teaching us how they actually did this. Material controllers, the midwayers, and everyone that was involved, they probably will teach us what exactly happened during this episode,
Mhm.
Gary, would you take the next one, please?
And this is the first and only natural nature miracle which Jesus performed as a result of his conscious pre-planning. It was true that his disciples were disposed to call many things miracles, which were not, but this was a genuine supernatural ministration. In this case, so we were taught, Michael multiplied food elements as he always does, except for the elimination of the time factor and the visible life channel.
Okay. I'm gonna stop on this paragraph tonight, y'all, and we're gonna go on to the next one next time. But I want to mention something here. All right. Um, First, this is a supernatural ministration. Okay.
Correct.
So only Jesus could have done this. There's no other being on the planet, has been, ever will be able to do this. Right. Because it's a supernatural ministration. And I want to mention here, this is probably something like how they feed us as Morantia beings when we get to the mansion worlds. Okay? That's what I wanted to bring up here because they feed us some kind of Morantia food when the first mansion world for sure. And so they have to manufacture this in some way. And it makes you wonder if the supernatural ministration is not the same technique they use to feed multitudes and multitudes of beings on the mansion world.
Yeah, because it says right here, Michael multiplied food elements.
As he
He always
always
does.
as he always does. That's right. So that makes you think that he does the same technique on the mansion worlds to keep the people on the mansion worlds fed, right?
Mhm.
Makes sense. All right, and we'll take it up on making a king, the king making episode next time. Let me swap out the share. All right.
May I
Huh?
may I read this?
If you feel compelled to do so, go right ahead, Gary.
Okay. Prayer of acceptance. I believe that God is my paradise Father, and that only by faith am I saved. No sacrifice is necessary. By this same faith, I became a child of God and know that all men and women are my brothers and sisters. We know the Son of God, the sovereign of our universe of Nebadon, as Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. By allowing the will of God to become my will, I will someday stand in the presence of the Paradise Father. In the name of Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen.
Does it sound like a ultimate decision?
Yes.
It does, doesn't it?
Mhm.
All right. Well, y'all, I enjoyed it. I hope you forgive me for getting off track here so far for a while tonight.
Okay.
Good to have some clarification.
Well, sometimes it is, and I hadn't taken the opportunity to do that in a while. I'm hoping it didn't offend anybody.
To tell you the
But-
truth, I can't wait until we finish this so we can start from the beginning.
Well, I don't know if I'll be starting from the beginning again, but there are a few things I would like to go back through. I'd like to definitely go back through the Caligaston 100 and
Yes.
how the giants came about and that sort of thing. I've got more clarity now in my head than I had when I taught it the first time back in 2013 or 18 or whenever it was. And it's just because I've grown spiritually. I feel like I'm better equipped to teach it. So makes a big difference. So maybe that'll be my next book, The History of the World, right? All right, y'all.
That'd be
In
great.
100 pages too, right?
Huh?
In 100 pages, right?
In running, yeah. I don't work miracles.
500 pages.
Well, I did 600 pages on angels, so I I got kind of long-winded on that one, didn't I? Oh well. Okay, y'all. We will see everybody on Thursday, and we'll wrap this paper up on Thursday then. Okay.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
I'll see you. Thank you.
Love you guys.
Love you
Love you
guys
too.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Night.
Bye.